News at Noon on Kaieteur Radio. Kevin Smith here.
And I'm Gail King.
And before we get to the top stories, let's get to today's front page comment of the Kaieteur News. Behavior unbecoming in the National Assembly. Guyanese parliamentarians provided proof of the vulgarity and personal abuse which continues to masquerade as representative parliamentary democracy. The budget debate kicked off last Monday with parliamentarians hurling the most scurrilous attacks at each other. Instead of focusing on what matters most to citizens, some MPs assailed the assembly with bitter and personal abuse. Instead of discussing how Guyanese will or will not benefit from the country's oil and gold, some members were more concerned with brandishing their record of fertility and pelting homophobic aspersions. While all of it took the form of heckling, it went beyond the pale. This exhibition of crudeness and crassness did not make for pleasant listening or viewing. Some of the comments were dirty, sickening, and insensitive. It was a display unbefitting of the National Assembly and has exposed a sorry bunch of pretenders devoid of the courtesies and respect expected in our National Assembly. It was an unforgettable and unforgivable, indecent and smutty performance. We feel tainted just writing or talking about it. And on that note, we head over to the top stories we're tracking in today's News at Noon. Investor group exposes ExxonMobil's deceit with emissions reduction plan and says it runs counter to Paris Agreement. ExxonMobil sued for allegedly inflating value on oil assets, and a 98-year-old woman assaulted and raped, 4 arrested. Meanwhile, no structural changes were made to Liza Destiny to increase production, and MP asks court to declare amendment to Fiscal Management and Accountability Act unlawful, says constitutional agencies should be free from any control of the executive. Stay tuned.
And now for the news in detail. Following heightened calls from its shareholders that more action is needed in the fight against climate change, ExxonMobil announced that it would be reducing its emissions by 2025. In this regard, it said that shareholders can expect to see a reduction of its upstream greenhouse gas emissions by 15 to 20% when compared to 2016 levels. Meanwhile, investment group Engine Number 1 said that scrutiny of the company's claims reveals that its efforts fall short of what is needed to position it for long-term value creation in a rapidly changing world, and highlights the significant long-term risks associated with the company's current business model. In fact, the investment noted that claims of consistency with the Paris Agreement fall far short of targeting net zero emissions by 2050.
And now let's tell you, a class action lawsuit was filed against ExxonMobil on January 28 in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Texas, alleging that ExxonMobil violated federal securities laws by misleading investors as the valuation of certain company assets in the Permian Basin, a petroleum province in the southwestern U.S. The lawsuit, Yoshikawa versus ExxonMobil Corp. Et al., was announced by Block and Leviton LLP, a firm that represents investors and helps to maintain the integrity of U.S. financial markets. The plaintiff, Mendy Yoshikawa, acquired Exxon securities at artificially inflated prices, the suit says, and was damaged upon the revelation of the alleged corrective disclosures. It represents all other similarly situated persons.
And now in other news, a 98-year-old pensioner who lives alone was found by her caretakers raped and left with a battered and bruised face yesterday morning at her home on the quarantine Berbice, while 4 men have been arrested in relation to the attack. Pamela Brosh, who takes care of the elderly woman, said she was alerted by a neighbor who also takes care of the pensioner that something was wrong. She disclosed that when she ventured over to the house, she saw the elderly woman with a swollen black and blue battered face. Regional Commander Jairam Ramlakan confirmed that 4 persons have been arrested. The men are in their early 20s. Of the 4 held so far, 1 was arrested in Crabwood Creek and another arrested in Rose Hall Town. They are being questioned as investigations progress.
And moving on, ExxonMobil Guyana's government and public affairs advisor Janelle Prasad said that the Eliza Destiny oil vessel was able to produce oil above nameplate capacity of 120,000 barrels per day because its total liquids capacity is 158,000 barrels per day, and produced water is currently coming up at a low rate. Chief Operations Officer at Hess Corporation Gregory Hill said that ExxonMobil intends to evaluate and pursue options to increase nameplate capacity at the Eliza Destiny. This would include some piping changes and debottlenecking, and is expected to occur during a third quarter shutdown period, Hill had explained. ExxonMobil maintains that the recently reported production numbers above 120,000 barrels per day are due to optimization of the vessel's current design.
Meanwhile, opposition member of parliament Ganesh Mahipal has joined several other persons to challenge the government on its decision to amend the Fiscal Management and Accountability Act. In court documents which were drafted by attorney Roysdale Ford, Mahipal contends that the move is unconstitutional in that the government is seeking to exercise a certain level of control over the constitutional agencies which are supposed to free from any control of the executive. As such, the opposition MP is seeking several declarations from the Supreme Court of Judicature.
It is now 12 hours 8 in Guyana. Coming up after the break, the Vice President says portion of Budget 2021 to be funded by loans. Dr. Vincent Adams says political leaders need to hold a united front and condemn Exxon's flaring. Meanwhile, sisters robbed by bandits and man shot, killed at Kurla party. Attendance was approximately 500 strong, and trucker charged for causing death by dangerous driving. Do stay tuned.
Guyana, please join me on the Glenlar.
Welcome back to the news in detail. Vice President Dr. Bharat Jagdeo revealed that a portion of the $383.1 billion budget for 2021 will be financed through loans. With aims of managing the debt and spending, the Vice President explained that the PPPC government is looking to establish a cap and is currently looking at examining recurring expenditure. This story comes on the heels of the senior minister, Dr. Ashni Singh, revealing that no new taxes funded the $383.1 billion budget. However, Dr. Singh failed to state how much of the budget was actually financed loans.
In other news, Guyana puts on a united front when it comes to fighting for the country's patrimony in the Venezuela border controversy, with political leaders casting aside differences and banding together to ensure that every square mile of the country remains intact. That same unity should be applied when it comes to condemning ExxonMobil's continued flaring. So said former EPA head Dr. Vincent Adams. Dr. Adams said that flaring issues have only since been recorded at the Eliza Destiny oil vessel, Exxon's first project. With the oil giant eyeing more ships for the Stabroek block, Dr. Adams firmly believes that it needs to ensure that it nips flaring in the bud at the Eliza Phase 1 project before anything else.
And now in other news, a 40-year-old housewife and her sister were robbed of their belongings by 2 bandits, one armed with a handgun and the other with a knife at their Monroe Post Railway embankment home. Ahilia Robertson, the housewife, claimed that one of the suspects hit her to the neck before escaping. The suspects were seen leaving in a silver car heading in the western direction. According to reports, the women were robbed of 2 Samsung cell phones, 1 gold iPod, and 1 silver HP laptop. No one was arrested in connection with the robbery as yet, but an investigation is still ongoing.
And now let's tell you, a 27-year-old man was yesterday morning shot and killed during a party which was attended by over 500 persons. The dead man has been identified as Dale Christopher of Rosemary Lane, Cummingsburg, Georgetown. According to a police report, the shooting incident occurred around 6 hours at Hill Street Lodge. The release also stated that 3 persons are in custody along with the alleged shooter, who is a 40-year-old unemployed man of Freeman Street, East La Penitence. 3 persons were subsequently arrested and were placed in custody. The investigation into the alleged killing of Christopher is ongoing.
Meanwhile, a 34-year-old truck driver, Troy Van Leeuwen, was on Monday placed on $300,000 bail after he was charged with causing death by dangerous driving. Van Leeuwen, Yarrowcabra Village, appeared at the Providence Magistrates Court before Magistrate Judy Latchman to answer to the charge. He pleaded not guilty to the charge, which alleged that on February 20th, at Dora Public Road, Susdike, Linden Highway, he drove a motor lorry in a manner dangerous to the public, causing the death of 60-year-old Murphy Madu.
And at this time, we now bring you your COVID-19 update. Worldometer says the number of worldwide coronavirus cases has reached 112.8 million, with deaths at 2.4 million and recovery cases at 88.3 million.
The Ministry of Health has recorded a total of 25 new COVID-19 cases, taking Guyana's overall number of confirmed cases to 8,452. Region 4 recorded 14 new cases, while Region 3 recorded 8 new cases, and Region 5, 6, and 7 each recorded a new case. There are 39 persons who are in institutional isolation, 406 patients in home isolation, and 9 patients are in the ICU at the Infectious Disease Hospital. 7,808 persons have recovered and 190 have died to date.
And coming from CNN, the U.S. FDA says the Johnson & Johnson COVID-19 vaccine meets requirements for emergency use authorization. A committee will meet Friday on next steps. Meanwhile, coronavirus variants will likely drive a new wave of transmission in the U.S. come spring, infectious diseases experts say. And the World Health Organization has reported a 6th consecutive week of declining global coronavirus cases. And on that note, we head over to the page 7 of the Kaieteur News dedicated to bluntness. If members of parliament cannot conduct themselves in a dignified manner in the highest legislative office of the land, how on earth could we responsibly expect them to make proper legislative amendments which reflect the dignity of the Guyanese people? Think about it. And now we've come to the end of today's News at Noon. I am Kevin Smith.
And I am Kayla King. Thank you for listening.
And that's the news of the moment. Remember